Okay. Welcome back to another episode of A Dose of Reality. Mm-hmm. Greetings to all. Mm-hmm. Back in the building.
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah. And today we're talking about probably the subject I see discussed the most ever.
Ever?
Kind of.
This is an ever situation.
I don't know. I see it getting talked about a lot.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
So I thought today we could settle it once and for all. Who's the better gender, men or women? That's what we're getting into.
You want to settle that debate? That's a lot of pressure. I don't know if we can settle it.
I'm joking.
Wild.
But yeah, we're getting into it. What our culture teaches about men and women, male, female, masculine and feminine.
Right. That sounds more reasonable than who's the better gender. Yeah.
We'll settle that another time.
Well, okay.
Obviously women. No.
It's begun already. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
So let's get into it. Gender roles, gender wars, what we be seeing. Should one submit? All those conversations you be seeing online. Let's get into it.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Fair enough. Don't set me up, Don't.
Yeah.
Don't throw some things my way.
I'm going to sit back for this one. I just got questions.
Nah.
I'm going to trigger the bomb and leave it.
Don't upset. Don't have me upset the women and then it's done. That's just...
Yeah.
Go easy.
I'm leaving you to it.
Wow.
But yeah, where to start? I mean, I have a list of questions. These are all like genuine questions or statements I've seen online.
Fair enough.
And I feel like a good place to start is something that's often open for debate, especially stemming from if you're religious, is who came first, men or women?
Right. Okay.
Who came first on this planet? So I'll pose that to you. Let's start with that one.
Funnily enough, despite the debates throughout the years on this topic and the perspective on this topic, a lot of it comes from religion. It's a pretty easy one, to be honest. Very clearly, women came first.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's just straightforward, really. It's only through this warped perspective of this last age of existence that this is even a topic of discussion. Because obviously we have the... definitely when you're dealing with the main religions of this time, you have a situation where it's believed that my man Adam was about, and God just pulled out his rib and was like, ta-da, here's Eve. Here's Eve. Okay, so scientifically it doesn't make sense. We haven't seen, one thing I said before is we haven't seen it since. We've never seen a woman come out of a man since. It hasn't happened, but we've seen it in reverse many times, and we'll continue to see it. But scientifically, it's just not plausible. It's not possible because, as we know, when we look at men and women, we have a genetic science that we can't ignore. And the genetic science is quite simple in this situation. Women have more DNA than men do, right? Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with the scientific equation, women are XX beings with 2 X chromosomes, and men are XY beings with one of those Ys being a maimed, shall we say, X, right?
Interesting.
No, but you know this. So you have a situation where genetically we have less information. If you look into the X and the Y chromosomes, you'll find out that the Y has less genetic information than the X. Therefore, it's impossible to pull an X out of a Y, but very possible to pull a Y out of an X. I.e., if you had an XX being and you were able to cut off, for lack of a better term, one of the tips of one of the X's, right? And effectively turn that X into a Y, you would be changing a woman into a man, essentially, or you'd be developing a man out of a female being, if that makes sense. So the idea that man could have come before woman is an idea that's been used to kind of, act as the foundation of the patriarchal age, really, because then it's kind of psychological, isn't it? It's like, well, you came out of us. Your purpose is to serve us and help us.
You were created for us.
You were created for us, right?
What it says in the Bible.
Yeah, Adam was mad lonely by himself, and God was like, oh, damn it. All right, let me pull out a rib and we'll make Eve. Okay, and then the whole idea of that story, because if you look at the story, obviously it's Eve that, isn't it Eve that messes up first and kind of speaks to the devil and gets the whole apple situation flowing, right? So the psychological impacts of that story is like, oh, you guys came along and just messed everything up, right? And that's in the way in which the world kind of runs from that perspective, where it's like, if you are psychologically affected by religion, then that's how you see things. You kind of see man as the original, the one that was here, and women as the ones who have just literally, their purpose is to serve, to help out and just complete and just make things easier. And it's not that they can't make things easier, obviously they can, but to suggest that is their purpose, when it is clear they were around before us, would be ludicrous. So yeah, that's a relatively straightforward one. Women came before men. The way our science goes into it is, if you read scrolls like Who is God, Female or Male, or Genetic Kiss, or 18+18+1, there's several scrolls that go into it. You speak of the science of it, whereby we had a scientist, I think it was Sackmet, I'll get the exact tones of that being, who basically experimented with the XX chromosomes, and from her experimentation was able to pull a Y out of the X, and then that is where you had the whole male being manifest. So yeah, women came before man. Women are capable of reproducing. Women have the womb, so on and so forth. Women have more genetic material. This is why we have nipples sitting on our chest as men that don't do a thing. They're just sitting there. And the reason being is that we have less genetic, we're less complete. And that demonstrates itself in the fact that we have mammary glands, so to speak, that are inactive, and we don't have a womb. Our being is not capable of shaping another being within us. And yeah, I'm pleased about that. I'm not trying to do all of that. I'm trying to leave that to you guys. But those are the realities that we deal with. So women obviously came first. More information, more DNA. So if God had an Adam and an Eve in front of him, he could pull an Adam out of an Eve. Scientifically speaking, he couldn't do it in reverse. So I remember the first time we taught this. Oh, the men, they weren't pleased at all.
Oh, yeah. I remember it was a class.
They weren't pleased at all.
I remember there was this particular guy who's like, what is this? Woman is God. I've never heard this.
Yeah, he was offended. And we was like, we knew, innit? Because we've been teaching class for a few weeks. For maybe a few months now. You develop a following. Everyone's looking forward to class. You got your guys who are coming like, yeah, I love your classes. And we knew it was like, we got to drop this because the book's out, right? Dropped it. And the men were looking at us like, you traitors. What are you up there talking about? It's like, oh, this is facts. This is science. This is reality.
But all the science was laid out. So
you can't deny it.
That's the next week they came like, I looked into it. Okay, yeah.
But that wasn't bad. A week's adjustment wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Some people, they turn their back and they'll never come back towards that information again. But yeah, they reacted, but obviously difficult for them to argue with it, which is probably why they were like, because obviously you're laying it out from a scientific point of view, which is the gift of this doctrine, really. It's very, you can get into debates, and we'll obviously touch on those topics if you insist. But what the reality is that if you drop it on a scientific level, it becomes difficult to negate. Mm-hmm. And that is the gift of this doctrine, because obviously Baba Yanon's given us the science of it. He didn't just say something and it's like, oh yeah, that's how it is. He gives us the science. Look into it and go and do your research. And so scientifically, we can see that the so-called biblical story and any religious story that cites that on this physical plane, because remember, when we're dealing with gender in this form, we're talking about the physical plane. When we go beyond this physical plane, it doesn't exist in this form, if that makes sense. But on the physical plane, to suggest that man came before woman just doesn't make any sense. And we've got the science to prove it. And with the main science being those chromosomes, XX and XY. And to be honest, you could leave it there, but we could even beyond that go into mitochondrial DNA. And the fact that everybody obviously has mitochondrial DNA, but upon having it, you've received it from your mother and only your mother. Okay, your father doesn't pass on mitochondrial DNA, and that mitochondrial organelle is crucial to your being. It gives you the energy to live, so to speak. Do some research into mitochondria and mitochondrial organelle and so on and so forth.
The powerhouse of the cell.
The powerhouse of the cell, right? The battery in a sense. So, and you get your mitochondrial DNA from your mother, right? When that sperm fertilizes the egg, that tail drops off. You lose the male side of it, loses something, doesn't pass anything on. So we all have it, but if you do not have a daughter as a mother, then that will not pass on beyond that next generation. The males cannot pass on mitochondrial DNA. And remember, the important thing about mitochondrial DNA, we might have mentioned this before, is that it's, untampered with. When you're dealing with nuclear DNA, that can be affected. Obviously, when a mother and father mix, their nuclear DNA mixes in order to create a third being, if that makes sense. And your nuclear DNA is subject to your environment, is subject to change. But your mitochondrial DNA is not, because of the way that it's encased in that circular structure. Again, 18 plus 1 for the science of it. So it means that DNA is protected, which means you can trace your lineage all the way back to wherever, because your mitochondrial DNA is exactly the same as your mother's and her mother's, and so on and so forth. So you can trace a lineage back very easily because the DNA is unaffected. And all of this happens through the woman. So to suggest that there was a time when the woman didn't exist or that man came before her that's insane. The very act of physical life requires, upon its existence, upon the first point of existence, requires methods to sustain itself or to reproduce. And that cannot be done without the woman. Therefore, it would not make sense in nature for physical life to exist. And when you're talking about the human species and the woman to ever not, it wouldn't make sense. The woman has to be there from the first point in order for that sustenance and that continuation of life and that reproduction, so on and so forth. So yeah, you can go into the sciences of it, which may take a bit longer if you want to, but the simple answer, is women came first. Straightforward.
Okay. I mean, you touched on a little bit, you mentioned that women can give birth without men. Can you expand on that? Because that's one argument I see where women need men to give birth. They need the sperm. Right. So that's another argument to put forward.
Yeah, right.
I see put forward.
But again, it's an illogical argument when it comes to gender wars, because even what you're saying there is that at worst or best, whichever way you look at it, we need each other, right?
Yeah.
The man doesn't ejaculate out into the air and there lies a child, right? Okay, you need a womb. you need someone to help. So even that, because you're correct, I've seen that argument to kind of use to kind of state that man is God or man is the first, and without man there is no spark, there is no so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the obviously the cooperation is divine. It's not we shouldn't be denouncing any side, really, is what I'm saying. The cooperation is divine. And that connection is obviously a beautiful connection. If a child comes by way of it, then happy days for everyone. If you were looking forward to that child, no accidents. But you know what I'm saying. Happy days, all right. So they shouldn't be used to denote or to demote the woman. But the reality of it, and again, who is God, female or male, genetic kiss. The reality of it is that women are capable of reproducing without man, and this ties into the Bartholin gland, which is essentially the equivalent of the bulbal urethral gland in the male. But a woman is capable of ejaculation, and a woman is capable of fertilizing her own egg or growing an egg that hasn't been fertilized by a male sperm. And obviously when you go into that science, that's when you get your most pushback, because obviously we haven't seen it much. We haven't seen it though. What happened to Mary? Something happened there. So, but anyway, different story. But anyway, so apparently we haven't seen it much. But one thing I would always state, and again, go to Who is God for the science of it, and when it's all broken down, is that just because we don't see it in our lifetime or even in recorded history, it doesn't mean that it's not possible and probable. Okay, so in nature, you have situations where beings, both animals and human, do things that haven't been done for a long time in their history based on their surroundings or based on their environment. Point in case, we saw the other day the female crocodile, not around any other males, and then suddenly was like, you know what, I'm going to have some children. And it hadn't been seen in so long. They hadn't recorded that ever occurring before.
It's usually triggered due to necessity.
Yeah, due to necessity. It was like, okay, well, I cannot continue my species if I don't do this because there's no males around. And so at that point, that triggered something in the being where it was like, okay, parthenogenesis. So parthenogenesis is an important science. Parthenogenesis, I think partheno means virgin. And so you're essentially talking about giving birth without, a virgin birth.
I do remember looking into it years back on the human side as well. I'd have to see if I can dig up those articles. But it does occur sometimes in human women, there have been cases of that. Probably not as publicized because people wouldn't really believe it because of the way the world is now. Oh yeah, right, you're a virgin.
Yeah.
You got pregnant. Right. No one would really believe that in this climate. But yeah.
Right, but exactly that.
There have been reports where women have said, I was a virgin and I got pregnant.
Yeah, and it's very plausible and it's very possible. And obviously, yeah, you might have a situation where, yeah, it's going to be difficult to believe in certain circumstances. But other circumstances, I'm sure you had a female or a woman who was just like, yeah, suddenly a child came, apparently out of nowhere. So this science is possible. It's just not going to happen often because we have a situation where women and men are used to reproduce in a certain way. And what would happen if you just took all the men out, don't do this, but dashed them on some island and left the planet with women only? I guarantee you that at some point, the women would find a way to reproduce without the presence of the males. And this is nature, the same way that crocodile did it. And several other, in nature, you can find several examples. A lot
within nature.
Several examples of parthenogenesis, for lack of a better word. So yeah, you have cases where this has happened. And this is a reality. This is a science, okay? Women, even just the fact that if we touch on the science we just spoke about, the fact that they are complete and you haven't taken anything away. For a man, you've taken something away in order for him to exist. He has less genetic material. The fact that a woman is complete in that sense means that there is essentially nothing she can't do genetically that a man can do. There's nothing a man can do that a woman can't, genetically speaking. It's just whether she chooses to or whether that's happening in nature at this point in time, which clearly is not happening often in recent history, but it can happen. So the fact that she's complete, yeah, she can do that. She can do that. She can definitely create life without the presence of a man. I'm not advocating for getting rid of the men. I'm just saying what's scientifically possible. So yes.
Sounds like a plan to me.
No, it's not a plan. It's not a plan. Don't get ahead.
Okay, let's get a little out there. I don't know. It's even out there. Right. This is the one that may be triggering people.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Should women submit to men?
Yikes. Should women submit to men? All right. I mean, the quick answer is as well the way things are phrased and termed, isn't it? When you go online and you see the way things are termed, it's termed to trigger people, isn't it? Mm. Because you have words like should and you have words like submit, which generate certain feelings immediately, right? So I have to do something? Oh, so you're controlling me. Should, that's what that indicates. And then submit, I don't know if that's the word I would use either as well, but the simple and quick answer, if you phrase it like that, is should women submit to men, would be no. And we can trace this back. I mean, even when you just look at it logically from the fact that if we agree that women came first, to submit to your creation doesn't seem logical, does it? You know, it would be like in the religious world, God submitting to man, really. It's like, well, I created you, I'm going to submit to you in that sense. So the quick answer would be no. And you have a situation where in order to really answer this question, we have to deal with life outside of what we know in terms of our lifetimes and what's on record. And we have to understand that there was a time where things aren't the way that they are now or have been in recent history, where you have a patriarchal system and males dominating. There was a time when this wasn't a reality, if that makes sense, or wasn't happening. And so to think outside of that space sometimes is difficult because you think in terms of what you've seen and what you know, if that makes sense. But there would have been a time where woman being the first physical humanoid on the planet, or in existence really, when you deal with the XX chromosomes, what we're really saying is X comes before Y all the time. You have a situation where she is a goddess, right? And to submit means you lose your goddess status, in a sense, if that makes sense, especially if you're submitting to that which came after you. And so we can have various analogies for that. I'll stick though with this, with the women and the men. The quick answer would be no, you shouldn't submit. What we can acknowledge is that the world has run a certain way in recent times, right? And so to change it back, which is what's happening now, remember, we always talk about the end of an age, and we talk about it from the perspective of Africans and Europeans and how Africans are going to begin to rise back to their rightful place where they've been, after they've been trampled upon and put to the bottom. To change it back and go towards what you would call original nature or natural nature, that is happening, but it will not happen overnight. And so, No, go ahead.
Which I always think is an important point to push. It's a process. Because even us as Sabaeans, we're always equal. Men and women are equal within our tribe, but we're a matriarchal tribe. Some might then say, well, why don't I see women leading this then? Well, everything's a process, isn't it? And it's sometimes for women to take up that mantle and become aware of their divinity. That's the whole point of the information being put out there. We've gone through an age where women have been suppressed. The same way we say we've gone through an age where people of African descent have been suppressed.
Exactly.
It's a process of taking your divinity and power back.
Exactly. And taking back your seat, your rightful seat in nature, which as we see for Africans in general, forget gender for a moment, for Africans in general, can be difficult, right? Because there's so many mental barriers for us to get past. If we don't have this flaw, we have that flaw. If we're not in religion, then we worship material, or we've forgotten our divinity in some sense, right? This applies across both genders. So as Africans are trying to do this, and we see signs, we've spoken about certain things that we're seeing in Burkina Faso and Niger and so on and so forth. As we begin to see signs of Africans waking up and saying, we will also begin to see signs of women, African women, I like to speak from an African perspective, African women waking up as well. But yes, that takes some time, and that is a process. And everybody, when it comes to our people in general, presently in the recent history, both genders don't know how to act a lot of times. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Don't know how to act, right?
But before we get back on point, I just quickly want to add, I think it's important to note that even when we speak of African people and us taking back our role, it's important to note that we've been living specifically in the European patriarchy. I feel like patriarchy gets thrown around like, it's men, period. That is the problem. All of us have become victim to the patriarchal mentality, no doubt. But I think it's always important to note this didn't start with Black people or African culture, because sometimes, no doubt we all have to get together, but we're dealing with a very Europeanized mentality.
Definitely.
Living in the West.
Definitely.
So a lot of what we see is down to that.
Yeah. For sure. And that's spread worldwide, not just in the West, it's spread. And so you have a situation where many of us, no matter where we live on the planet, have forgotten certain aspects of our original culture, which will happen by nature. We've existed a long time on the planet. Even just on the planet, we've existed a long time. So to go back to how we originally were living, that's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. And you're dealing with the fact that records have been destroyed and culture has been stripped and so on and so forth. So you're trying to find your way back. But yeah, on that point, the quick answer, like I said, would be no, they shouldn't. But we acknowledge that we're living in a time and day where there are different things happening, and we're coming out of, like you say, that patriarchal or that European patriarchal existence. So I prefer not to speak about it in terms of should or shouldn't, or even submit or not submit. When we say submit, what do we mean? What does to submit mean?
Let's define it.
Okay, I'll define it.
So, submit, accept or yield to a superior force or to the authority or will of another person. All
right. So, even going by that, immediately, I can feel women. Yield to a superior force?
Wow.
No. So, but when you're looking at the word from that perspective, no, you shouldn't submit. If that's a word. And what I would say is that first, dealing with the should or should not, we live in a day and time where there are so many different types of people who want different types of things. So should and shouldn't rarely comes into it unless you're dealing with extreme things like, you shouldn't kill innocent people or something to that effect. But should and shouldn't rarely come into it. It's what you can and choose to do, right?
Yeah, what you want to do.
What you want from life, right?
Yeah. What's best for you?
What's best for you? So you have
your dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. So you have plenty of couples who work in ways that other people are going to look upon and be like, that's wrong, and they'd be like, well, it works for them, right? So should and shouldn't not really come into it. It's what you choose to do, how you choose to operate as a couple. I think the most important thing when you're dealing with a couple, from my perspective, if I thought about it individually, would be cooperation rather than submission. We can cooperate. Yeah, we can cooperate. We can work together, right? And if there's something that you are better at than me, then I yield. I'll follow your lead. And there's something that I am better than you, you yield. And we work and we cooperate. And we're like, okay, yeah, it works. And these nuances are going to be very particular and different because we live in a time where there's so many different types of people, if that makes sense. And so there's going to be different answers to each person. It's like, well, should I behave this way? You might say yes to someone else and no to the person right in front of you. Like, no, that won't work for you.
It's not one size fits all.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. But if you had to sum it up from a holistic point of view in terms of woman in her original state and man in his original state, no, woman should not submit. And natural nature, whether we realize it or not, is matriarchal. Nature is matriarchal. And so even if we've lived in a time where it hasn't been as such, and I see a lot of claims that because man is physically stronger normally, then that means he's better, right? Because he can got all the muscles and stuff. But this reality didn't make you stronger. It was about the mind. It was about forces, the physical forces such as sex, which is a force that women should be the head of, should be in control of. And Baba Yanun spoke about this before, how women have the ability to elevate the man through this force, right? Mm. And it's quite simple. It's like you don't give it up unless a man is achieving certain things. And his natural desire for that will motivate him. Trust me, if a man thinks he can't get what he desires unless he steps up, then he'll step up or he'll fall by the wayside. But most men be like, oh, snap. All right, okay, I guess I'll do what I got to do. You know, and that's really what motivates man. There's nothing that motivates a man more than a woman in any degree. We went through this before as well, whether it's your mother, your sister, your daughter, or your wife. There is nothing that motivates you more than a woman. And we know this as men. As soon as we hear our sister or our daughter or our wife, something's happened, or they've been threatened in some way, the trigger response is something that's serious, almost divine. It's like, no, that can't run. Protection is needed immediately if you're vibrating correctly. And so there's nothing that motivates us more. And there was a book called The Procession Change where Baba Yanun explained that. Said, yeah, you as women can control, I don't know if you use the word control, but elevate the man. Motivate the man. That's the word. Motivate the man to be better through use of this sex force. And if you don't give it to him unless he's attained a certain level within his life, then he'll move quicker in attaining that level, right? And this is how things work tribally, right? You knew that you weren't going to just turn 18 and some divine woman was there waiting in your bedroom. It wasn't going to be that way, right? No, it's like you had to attain some things, right? You had to accomplish some things and become an accomplished man before it was, deemed right and correct that you would have yourself a wife, because then you knew that you could do the male side of things, if you like, in taking care of your family. And so this is a reality. And Baba explained, you have scrolls like Planet Earth is Woman.
Planet Earth is Woman, Goddess Creator.
Probably a couple of others as well.
Probably a couple of others. I always think Wu Nawap or Wu Sabat Commandments on sexual violations is a great one. The Lotus of Life. The
Lotus of Life, actual fact. That's a great one.
But I remember even him mentioning, I can't remember the exact words. It might have been in the Planet Earth as Woman that just basically the male was disarmed by the woman in Age of Old. Although he knew he was physically stronger than her, his desire for her or his want for her was such that he was just disarmed to her will.
Yeah, exactly. He was a different way with the woman than he would be with fellow man. A man, it might be,
Yeah, unfortunately, we're going through an age where the male has asserted his physical strength over her. Right. So we deal with that as well.
And that's not natural nature. No. To assert your physical dominance over a woman as a man is not natural nature. And that's not how it should be, as you mentioned. And in fact, in that scroll, I think it was the same scroll, might be Planet Earth as Woman, he mentioned that the problem with the planet is actually that women submitted to man.
Yeah. He said she fell in love with her creation and hence submitted to him. Something like that.
Yeah. And here we are. This is all Yule's fault. Fix it.
Okay, so I want to get into
Fix it now.
So we say that a woman shouldn't submit to a man. So then how do we complete that? Because it can feel like women and men are at odds and not really finding that cooperation in relationships. And
right.
Especially when I go on social media, they're just constantly at each other's throats about stuff that don't mean anything, but you can just see there's a lot of hurt.
Yeah, there is a lot of
trauma.
There is a lot of trauma
between men and women. So, yeah, I guess I'll put that out there. How do we find that cooperation?
I mean, that's going to be difficult. And
sorry. To add to that, some would then take that not submitting then means, well, I don't have to do anything you say.
Right.
So we get that side of the scale where certain women just can't be reasoned with. I'm putting that out there. I've definitely seen that as well. So I talk from both sides the scale. I'm like, I don't think that's a healthy thing either. Like, I think everyone needs someone they listen to.
Yeah, of course. But
yeah, I put that out there.
Yeah.
How do we find that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I cannot solve this issue. Okay, I can't solve it. What I can say is this: I agree 100%. This is not a case of being out of control. Everyone should answer, for lack of a better word, to somebody. You should have some, but it's words like submit and control that trigger the response often, where a woman's like, nah. I agree that I've seen plenty out there that cannot be reasoned with. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think people should at least be able to be reasoned with. And that's not saying someone has control over you.
No,
it's just... It's a respect thing, isn't it?
It's a respect thing.
I think that's what we're dealing with as well, a lack of respect.
A lack of respect.
On both sides.
Exactly that. And so you have a situation where I can talk about my personal experience and then I can talk about what I see out there. What I see out there, I agree, you see a lot of what appears to be unreasonable behavior on your social medias. Some of it is manufactured. Some of it is designed that way. You've been triggered by something specific. We spoke about the
Kiki and Usher thing.
We spoke about that and how it's like, guys, we shouldn't be arguing about this. It's literally
the amount of anger.
But it was so much venom in that, and so people have been traumatized, and then they're kept in that traumatic state because they're reminded of it every so often. In the celebrity world, you see something that triggers, oh, that's outrageous. How could she behave like that? Oh, that's outrageous. How could he do that? How could he's trying to control her, so on and so forth. And so when you're in the Western world, things are very difficult to fix because the mentalities have been manufactured and it's been done so over a long period of time. And we're talking hundreds of years. We've been made into the beings that we are now, where, it's not going to work. We have to take back our original culture to have any chance of cooperation with each other.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I do think that a large lack of our morals is due to the Western culture we've been raised in. Like, Western culture has very few morals. People think certain stuff's okay that just isn't okay.
Right.
Like, if you're brought up within certain African cultures, there's certain morals you're taught that are just non-existent out here.
Right. And the Western world deliberately shatters all of that. So it's a different mentality entirely. So when you deal with a situation in our culture, a lot of the things that you would advise, if that's the word, women and men do is based on their nature, right? So when Baba Yanon advises that as a woman you don't sexually mix willy-nilly, it's because that's for your safety, both your physical, spiritual and mental safety, right? Because when you take in genes, that affects your being. You take in too many of them and you could lose your mind, literally. So a lot of this is based on safety. There was reasons for cultural practices, and a lot of those things have been thrown out the window. And now because it's become about the battle, you think that, okay, if I mix with whoever I want as many times as I want to, that's me taking back some form of control that's been taken from me. And it's not that something hasn't been taken from you. Certainly it has. It's just that that's not the way to get it back. That's just the way to destroy yourself, if that makes sense. So when you're dealing with my own experience, like I mentioned, in terms of when I speak to women, not just women that I might be interested in, but women of all ages, elders, even young children who have wisdom of the older ones sometimes. But when you're dealing with women in general, if they respect you and have that love for you, whether it's family love, whether it's what you might call relationship love or so on and so forth, then you usually don't have many issues, if that makes sense. So in my own personal experience, I've never had this issue where I'm telling a woman that I have care for, be it my sister, although, sometimes, no, I'm joking, be it my sister, be it our mother, or be it any family members. I've never had a situation where I might be advising them as such or pointing them in the right direction and they're like, I'm listening to no man. I've never had that personally. Not really. I've never had it personally. So I think, and if I was going to have it from someone or I sense that energy, I wouldn't be going there to advise them. So I think when you have a connection that is worth something, with someone, you should automatically have respect and love. And if you have respect and love, then you don't really run into these issues unless you are subject to this environment or to the manufacturing that we see or to the triggering that we see in our world, on our planet, in our environment, so on and so forth. So personally, I'd be like, well, the respect and love is the most important thing. Submission, control, that's not necessary. If you have respect and love both ways, then as soon as someone speaks, you will listen. You will hear them out. It doesn't mean you won't have your own mind and make your own personal decisions, but you will listen. You will hear them out, won't you? And if you're not listening to them or you're not hearing them out, then there's at least no respect. And I really think that means there's no love in actuality. But this respect and love to me would be more important than anything else, because automatically in any connection you have, whether it's your friend, even we're speaking about gender now, but even male to male, a friendship, you'll look at it and say, well, I respect him. I'm going to listen to what he has to say, and vice versa. And if that isn't there, or that's only one-sided, then that friendship will fall apart. It will have to at some point. And that's the same with a relationship or any connection of any sort. The respect and the love is important. And so, like I said, I don't know how to fix this exactly, but I do know that we are very, very manufactured beings. We don't think for ourselves. We think we think as a new, the Baba Yanun described us as a new type of being, a new type of Negro that's been created by having been taken out of our original way of life and plucked in, obviously traumatized in different ways, and then plucked into this Western world. And the planet in general is sick as well. But we've been plucked into this Western world, and so we're behaving like something different. We don't behave exactly like what you might term the European, but we don't behave anything like what you would call an original African.
We're out of our minds.
We're out of our minds. And so a lot of the issues that I see, I'm just like, yeah, we're not the enemy of each other, and we don't even realize it. We're fighting, but we've been put in the ring and given boxing gloves, and the bell's been sounded. And it's like, okay, yeah, let's fight, because that's what we think we're supposed to do. But a lot of the time we really don't have to, and we should really be trying to find a solution. But with that being said, I will emphasize, I see people on both sides of this supposed gender war who don't act right.
Yeah, it's all of us. Let's get that straight. It's both sides.
Who do not
act right. There is no one right side.
Yeah, it's not that way. And so, but speaking from a male perspective, what I will say is that I feel the frustrations. You see what you see in social media or on TV, and you see how women behave, whether it's in reality or whether it's on the movies or so on and so forth. And yeah, sometimes it gets you burning inside, because you're like, this is not how it should be. How can they behave like this, and so on and so forth. And there's certain things that do naturally feel unnatural. So if we see a woman going from man to man to man, then instinctively, of course, we won't picture that as a potential wife, because it's like, she's gone from man to man to man. So that's instinct from a male perspective. But what I would say is that I always try to, as much as possible, it doesn't mean discussions aren't necessary, but I always try to put that mirror up. Anytime you start thinking, how can they act this way? Try to put the mirror up. And in this case, put the mirror up to men. And try to think, is there any way in which we've contributed to this behavior that we see from women that upset us so much, if that makes sense? And I do think there's ways in which mistakes that men have made, speaking from a male perspective, that I would look back at like, yeah, we could have not done that. We could have treated them better. We could have done this. And there's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. So when you're dealing with pain and hurt, one thing we know is that if you don't look within, there's usually no solution, right? If we're constantly pointing outwards.
I think that's important to acknowledge. There is a lot of trauma, and that's the side people are coming from. So I think even I mentioned I want to get to talking about mental health. Because I think it's Mental Health Awareness Day soon. But yeah, that is a big one, because there's a lot we've gone through as a people, and we're not necessarily going to find the healing we need within this system we're currently in. So I think that's important to note, because as you say, the system we're currently in manufactures us being constantly in a traumatized state. So it's constantly re-traumatizing us and triggering us.
Exactly.
So I think that's important to know. One thing I did see way back that helped me is, which you could apply to any situation, not just relationships, is it's important to remember in arguments, it's not you against the other person, it's you and the other person against the problem.
Right. Deep.
Yeah.
Deep. Very important to remember that. And if you have that perspective in an argument, then yeah, you might solve it, right? But there's a lot of arguments that we see online which are about jabbing and hurting each other in the issue against the pattern. It just gets personal, or it gets a little bit nasty, or a little bit,
Yeah, we've all been guilty of that. Yeah. Just triggered, and you're just trying to hurt.
You're just trying to hurt, right? You're just trying to say something. But yeah, there will be certain aspects of behavior. I think you're dealing with a society, remember, that has role models that kind of suck. There's been role models that have been propped up. One of the prominent female role models, when you look at the West, is Kim Kardashian. So if that's the situation, Kim Kardashian has how many followers? How many women?
A lot.
Following her ways, right? And at the end of the day, you're dealing with a woman who got famous and achieved what you would picture as success by way of a sex tape. So if that's the first step, it's like, women are going to be looking at it like,
okay,
all right, okay, so is that the way to do it? And so you have a situation where women can achieve fame, whether minor fame or major fame, through way of her body. And so she's realized that.
It's just easier to show your ass.
It's easier if you don't got no talent, it's easier to show your ass. And that applies for women because, again, women and men are different. So it doesn't apply the same for men, right? Men can go on social media right now as a force and start. It's not gonna have the same effect, right?
Not the same effect, but I did be seeing male first traps. So.
No, of course. If it exists.
Women be thirsty these days as well. Some of the things I see women saying in comments, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot. But these are the realities. So as men, if you are feeding into that, then whether we want to admit it or not, we're part of the problem, isn't it? Because I've seen plenty. It's natural, isn't it? It's like, but that's the slight double standard, isn't it? You, as a man, you'd look upon it and say, you might say to your wife, your sister, or anyone related to you, don't you ever do that. Don't ever go on social media and post them pictures looking like this and looking like that. And then you
scroll through your likes.
You're like pow, double tap,
yeah.
double tap, right? So it is, they can achieve. We live in a society which is based a lot on attention, right? And you can monetize attention. If you get enough eyes on you, you can earn money, right? And so a lot of women of a certain nature have figured out how I can get a lot of attention if I show my body, if I behave a certain way, if I behave in what you might call associated with Western values, if that makes sense. And so they can achieve success that way. And so they go about doing it, And so we live in a period of time where it's very, very popular, or more popular than it's certainly been in the past. And obviously technology plays a role in that, to do these things, to show your body, or to broadcast your sexual activity, or to have your OnlyFans account, or to have an account where you're showing this and showing that. This is the reality. And so you see it in everything. We've known this for a while because we've always known that big advertising companies use sex to sell everything. Something that has nothing to do with anything like sex, they'll use sex to sell. So if they're selling a nice car, they'll put a nice looking woman beside the car, have a line on the car, whatever. Like, yeah, buy this Mercedes. So this is a reality. We always knew that when you're on the physical plane, you're subject to the sex force. And a lot of us have become slaves to it. That's just the reality of this time. Most people, certainly in this part of the planet, are subject to the sex force. They're slaves to it. And so when you have
I've had the book in it, Sex Force, Spirit Force.
Yeah.
Just brought that to me. But yeah.
Yeah. So when you have a situation where the majority of the population is slave to the sex force, then it means you can make a lot of money if you utilize that force, right? So there's all logical steps to this. And so we have a period of time where, because as we're coming out of a period of time where it seems like, okay, men have controlled women or kept them behind the scenes or kept them at the back. You have a period where women are trying to take back their seat. And it's coinciding with this rise of the use of the sexual force and technology and so on and so forth. So you're going to have, whether we like it or not, a lot of women doing that. But that speaks for the world itself. Within our tribe and with our family, obviously, we have certain values and ideals where it's like, no, that's not how we behave. That's not how we behave. But this is a reality. And so it's difficult to dismiss it if you are also using it. That's what I would say as a man, from a male perspective. If you are absorbing the content and then coming out on the other side and saying, the way they behave is just wrong, then that's a difficult position to take. You have to be clear on where you stand on it, if that makes sense.
And I think on the flip side too, because you've sparked an interesting point. We've lived through an age where women have been suppressed, so now we're trying to take our power back, for lack of a better term, and find ourselves. So what will be said a lot is women will be exploring their sexuality because we, in the past, were shamed for being sexual beings. So we're trying to explore our sexuality and find what that is. But it's being done a bit haphazardly. I still think it's leaning into ultimately the patriarchy, because I never get the idea of, oh, I'm going to get back at men by sleeping with a bunch of men.
Yeah.
That's what men want.
Yeah, there's a bunch of men that are like, all right, yeah, get back at him. Here's my number, you know?
Yeah, you take your power back.
Yeah, take it back.
Call
right?
me. So
yeah.
I get it. I get the feeling, because I've had same conversations with women, and it can just feel like, oh, we can't really express ourselves anyway, in any way, or express our feminine or sexual nature. I do think there's a fine balance to it, because there's a lot of power in mystery as well. But I do think also the key is getting back to our original culture, because we know in a lot of African cultures, things weren't sexualized within that way, where women showing their bodies wasn't looked at how it's looked at in this Western culture, and wasn't used for monetization.
Right.
So
it's a natural fact.
Ultimately, we've said it. Culture's the answer. Getting back to our original ways.
Yeah.
Because we're literally out of our own minds, out of our own environment. How can we know that we're choosing or doing for self?
For self, innit? So even when you think you're choosing it, that choice has been manufactured. So all of this is by a clever design. So even when you rebel, that rebellion would have been foreseen. So if you're shaped in a certain way, it's known at some point you will rebel. So we have to be very careful and make sure that when we're trying to correct our vibration, we're doing so in accordance with our nature, within our original nature, because in this world it's very difficult to do. And most people in general, I won't even split it into genders, most people are playing into the environment or this large age of existence, and they're unable to think outside of that, if that makes sense. But yeah, you're 100% correct. So it's a very tricky time. What I will say is it's a very tricky time for women. You guys are gonna have to figure this out, and I think what I will say is the answer will lie within you guys. There are certain discussions that men should be a part of, but there are certain discussions that men shouldn't be a part of, right? And it should be you guys coming together and figuring it all out, and then rebalancing this world, because one thing that we do know is that it is the woman that has the power to rebalance the world. And specific, I'm talking the African woman, I'm talking our women, have the power to rebalance the world because she started it, right? All else came from her, right?
Black women are the blueprint.
They're the blueprint, right?
Period.
So they, being that original being, it's like, okay, we know the power lies within. So it's not that we won't have our part to play. We have our part to play. And it's not that we don't look out into this world and see, like I said, people just not acting right. But those of us who can, let's draw towards our culture, start to behave ourselves in accordance with some of the guidelines that certainly in the Sabaean nation that we've been given, and read. If you're not Sabaean, I don't know, just read and learn about who and what we really are as African beings, and how we're subject to forces that we were never subject to. All this would be like petty discussion for us in our original form. Gender wars? What are we fighting about? That makes no sense. It makes no sense. But in this state of existence, we see plenty of it, if that makes sense. But like I said, I see mistakes on both sides. And I think if both sides just sort of held up a mirror and said, no, you know what, let's try and address ourselves, and then take that and try and cooperate, I think would make it out. But I don't have the answers. That's what I will say. I do not have the answers as to how to solve this in totality.
We'll get there. We will get there.
I'll take your word for it. We
will get there. So we may have covered this a bit already, but do you think gender roles exist? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they exist to a certain point. I suppose it would be trying to decide how far that existence goes, because when you start it off, by nature, women and men are generally different, aren't they? And this is what happens as well. We can accept that there are different types. Again, when you read Who is God, Female and Male, something that Baba speaks about is the idea that, remember, you have different types of spirits manifested into different types of bodies, if that makes sense. So when you deal with proposed gender and the behavioral aspects that you associate with each gender, it's not zeros and ones. It's not block. You're going to have a woman that might act a little bit masculine, a little bit more masculine than other women, or the other women she's around. Slightly more. You might have a man that acts a little bit more feminine than the men he's around. So it's not a block where it's like women behave like that, men behave like that. It's not a block. That's not how gender works. But with that being said, when we deal with nature in general, we know there are certain things women do that men can't, right? And you created us for a reason. So there's obviously some things you want us to do that you're at very least you don't want to do. You'd be like, you guys take care of that, right?
Rather not.
Yeah. So with that being said, there's going to be some roles you associate with it. So there's nothing a man can do. Doesn't matter how much he wants to. He can't get that nipple to work, right? So there's no point the baby suckling on it, right? Okay. So you know that when you're dealing with breastfeeding, that has to happen by way of the mother. So there are certain roles that come by way of your abilities, of course, right? Generally, men at this day and time tend to be physically stronger than their female counterparts. So generally, you would say, okay, well, there's some manual labor to be done. As men, we should handle that, right? You know, you sit around as a man. There's not many men, if any, that I've met that if something heavy needs to be lifted, they're comfortable sitting down and letting a woman get up and lift it by herself. There's not many men that would be comfortable with that. So there are certain things that I think happen naturally in terms of your roles, but I don't think it's clearly defined across the board. I don't think that's the situation you have. I think you have a situation where every relationship is going to work best however that relationship works. And if you're not in that relationship, you really should have no say on what's right or wrong in that relationship. We have our guidelines, obviously, that we all try and listen to, but I've seen many different relationships. Some of them work and you're looking at them like, oh, that's not necessarily what you would expect traditional relationship to be, but those two look very happy. Why am I trying to, hey, you guys ain't following tradition. Why am I trying to get involved? So there's no block rules, I would say, but there's obviously certain things that are naturally going to happen. Certain things that take place naturally as a child. You tend in most situations to cling towards your mother more than you do your father, especially at a certain age. That's natural, right? We spoke about breastfeeding, but in general, you get a child. I saw a situation the other day where you had a child who wasn't trying to know their father. So in their mother's hands, happy. As soon as the father took it, let me out. Like, yo, I helped make you.
I don't know you like that. I don't know you like that. I really don't know you.
Yeah,
like
put me back in her arms, right? So, but in general, in all seriousness, women, mothers are going to be where the child cling to a little bit more.
And I do feel by nature, women are more
nurturers.
Right? We all have that within us, but traditionally women more nurturing. Just by the roles they have.
Have the ability to control the environment of the house.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I think these things have been made to seem like negative things. But I think once we're allowed to live within our femininity, you see the nurturing soft nature come out. Naturally. I think it naturally wants to.
Of course.
It's just we've been hardened by this very tough world.
By this world, right? But I agree completely because I've seen it in action. I've come across women who have been hardened by their circumstances, their experiences and their situations, and perhaps correctly so, have developed a shell. Like, no, I'm going to protect myself because I'm not safe. I can't be that in this world and keep myself safe. But if you was able to get closer to her, that guard would come down and that natural nurture would come out, if that makes sense, because it's part of women's nature to just control that environment. And we know as children, we had certain roles that our mother and father played. And we know we're coming into a different time. So it's not that everything's going to stay the same. But still, there was a balance to the behavior, right? So we knew that, okay, with our mulata, our mother, she controlled the house, made the house a nice environment. Our father, our mullad, was out to work. And we knew if we messed up in the day, we were there shaking. I'm going to tell your father. Wait till he gets home. And you're there like, what did I...
you, as soon as he walks in, you run to him like, hey.
Listen, she gonna say some things, but listen, how was work? Let's talk. So we used to do that. Our tactic as children would be, when we was very young, we would run up to our mud lad as soon as he got in the house and give him hugs, right? So, you had a long day at work, welcome home. Da, da, da. So you're trying to get to him first because you know. So our mud lad developed a system where she started calling our mud lad, our father, before he got home. That was news. Like, what you doing? You can't do that. Calling him and letting him know, hey, your children done misbehaved today. So you're running up like, yeah, let me get to him first. And he's like, I know what you did. And so you're running the other way. You're running the other way. All right. And so there was a natural environment that was created that instilled a level of not just discipline, but love in the house and just kept you balanced, right? So as children, we knew certain things you go to your mother for, certain things you go to your father for. And that wasn't, I'm not saying that should be absolute across the board. I'm just saying it helps a child if they know where to go for what, if that makes sense. Whatever that may be. It may change from family to family slightly. It might be a different situation. But in general, we spoke to our mother about most things that you wanted. Can I have a snack? Can I have some food? Can I have this? And then there were certain things, especially you, manipulative daughter, you would go to our father for and get his soft side out.
Yeah, I was definitely a daddy's girl.
Yeah, right. And him being, look at you. We ask him the same question. Nah, you guys ain't getting that. You ask him, of course. And so there's slight differences in the energies that you get from males and females. And I think a lot of that is natural, and it takes place naturally in a family. So whatever it is for your family, as long as there's some balance there, I just think that's whatever it is, you know, and not everybody has that balance. So we were just grateful for that balance, because not everyone lives in that type of household where you have both your mother and your father around in normal aspects. I'm not saying, you know, the father's gone, but I'm saying even if your parents are separated, then you're not having the same experience as what we had in that sense. So we were grateful to have that experience. But the balance, the balance was necessary. And there was just certain things you associated with our father and certain things we associated with our mother, and that there's no crime in that. Right?
Yeah, it was just natural.
It was natural.
I think definitely it's equal, but not the same.
Yeah, different.
So you have different roles. Ultimately, it's a partnership. And you just find a balance that works for you. It's pretty much just that. Yeah,
exactly. That works for you and works for your family. But certainly there will be certain things that generally across the board a mother's going to do, and generally across the board a father's going to do.
Yeah.
And as a child, we know that there's certain feelings we get from our mother and certain feelings we get from our father, and that's just the way it is. There's certain things that you're more inclined to go towards your mother for, and vice versa, if that makes sense. And that works in application. Obviously I speak from a male perspective because I'm male, but it will work slightly differently from a male or a female perspective, but you know that exists. So there are roles. In answer to your question, I think there are roles. It's just they don't have to be defined so specifically and absolutely across the whole board. There are certain things that, yes, only a woman can do, and then there are certain other things that you might expect a man to do, and there's nothing wrong with him taking that role, but it might be slightly different across different families. We're like, okay, in that family it works slightly differently, and it works for them. So you leave it to work for them, and you don't interfere with your opinions, if that makes sense. But with that, as Sabians, we have a culture that we lean towards, whilst understanding that we exist in a world that is very different to our culture. So we're slowly training ourselves to live more like what we would have originally lived as, if that makes sense. So I hope that's some type of answer to that.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
I think so. So, yeah, that was some good stuff.
I'm still alive.
Slightly. Yeah, they haven't come for you yet.
Yeah,
they haven't crashed through.
Wait for the comments.
The window.
Crash through the window.
Yeah. The truth is truth, I always say. I always say tribal living suits me. When we're out here in the West and everyone's for themselves, I don't even think it's good for people to be carrying so much alone.
Right.
That's another thing too. We've been very much trained that relationships is just man, woman. Family is just man, woman, children, and they do it alone. A lot of people have had to do it, and a burden has been on them. With tribal living, it's like, as we say, it takes a village.
Right. And so the whole
I'm very much down for that, and I'm sure a lot of women are.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Who's trying to deal with this alone?
Nah.
I think tribal living, we had it right.
Yeah, no, we definitely had it right, and that's naturally how it should be, right? As a tribe, you know that you're when you talk from a women perspective, you wouldn't just be as a child talking about your mother. You'd be talking about your grandmother and all your aunties and all the entire sisterhood within that tribe, right? Mm-hmm. And generally, as a tribe, you could be given those gems that you get from your female influence in your life by any of those tribal members. The mother wasn't alone. In fact, certain things might fall even more in the grandmother than the mother, depending on age and tribal rules and laws or so on and so forth. But the point was, the mother isn't alone in it. She's very much had a team of women around her to help her with her, what you might describe as her womanly roles, if that makes sense, or womanly duties, if that makes sense. So when you're alone, yeah, it's gonna hit you, and that can happen to both sides. It's gonna hit you. Snap! I got to deal with all of this.
Yeah, I think that's the pressure on a lot of relationships.
There you
is
go.
Just dealing with it alone, and everything that you're burdened by, you take out on each other. It's just all a bit too enclosed.
Yeah, too much tension.
Yeah,
too much tension.
Absolutely. But yeah, what can I say? That was we said a whole lot in that.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot.
That was a good one, though.
Interesting discussion. I feel like we'll discuss that again. Maybe get a couple of guests on. Actually, it would be interesting on this particular topic to hear some different perspectives.
Yeah, I always find it interesting.
Yeah,
hearing the different perspectives.
So if we were going to do one with guests, I would pick this topic. That could get fiery. That could get interesting.
It could get spicy.
Yeah, but no, in all seriousness, it's one of those things that, yeah, when you bring different minds to the table, as long as everyone comes in love and harmony, you can actually grow and learn. There's much to learn on this particular topic. So certainly we don't claim to have all the answers, but it's a very interesting discussion. Yeah, maybe we have to do that. I'll leave that with you.
Yeah.
Leave that with you.
I'll plan it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have to say, I didn't even come up with this topic. So.
Who came up with it?
Oh. Someone put it out there. I thought it was you.
Oh, it might have been me.
Yeah, I think it was you.
Oh, yeah.
People probably thinking that I brought this to the table. Like, yeah, I want them to know.
Yeah,
about the women.
It's a good few weeks ago, though, right?
Major.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting topic.
It was a good discussion. Good discussion. I got should I give them the dose for today?
Give them the dose.
Little saying for you all. Mm-hmm. This one's actually taken from The Lotus of Life by Baba Yannon. At the end of that book, there's a whole bunch of sayings. There's 100 sayings for the feminine, so those are really good. And there's sayings to couples for relationships. So there's a lot of good information in that book. Can't say it enough. But the dose for today is respect is more important than love.
Ooh.
Respect is more important than love. I thought that fit in with what we'll be talking about today.
Mm-hmm. It does. It kind of slotted in nicely, given what we were saying. So yeah. I'm not even going to add to that. I hear that.
The dose.
I hear that.
So I'd like to thank you all for listening. This has been a dose of reality with Nefrutat and Amakhu.
It's been a good one.
It's been a good one. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe, support the page.
Even if you don't like it.
Yeah, even if you don't.
Subscribe anyway.
Still subscribe.
Yeah.
Just anyway.
Yeah.
It's easy. Just click.
And
yes, we'll be back very soon. We will. Check us out on all the podcast platforms, on social media. As usual, links in description. And yeah, thank you very much, Michael.
It's good to be here.
Yes. For now, farewell. Wadu.
Farewell and wadu.